If you had the opportunity to go back in time and be present for one of Jesus' teachings, which one would you pick? I think a lot of people would say the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7, just revolutionary kingdom living. I think a lot of people might say John chapter 3, Jesus and Nicodemus, especially after watching The Chosen and just watching that interaction. You might actually get a little sneak peek on where Jesus stops talking and where John actually begins narrating. I challenge you to go read John 3. Don't pay any attention to the red or the black letters and see where you think Jesus stops talking and John begins to narrate. It's just a little challenge for you. I think other people might say Luke 6, 17 to 49, the Sermon on the Plain. It's like an abbreviated Sermon on the Mount. Other people might say the parables. Maybe somebody says, well, I would love to see Lazarus raised from the dead. He does some teaching there, so I would love to be present for that. I get it. But none of those are the ones that I would select. It may surprise you, but the one that I would select is only a single verse. I would want to hear Jesus utter what Luke summarizes in Luke 24:27 when he says this, "And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself." This is on the road to Emmaus. Jesus has been resurrected, and he's walking with these travelers talking about himself, and they don't yet understand who he is. He reveals himself to them later. But in the meantime, this verse is just so mind-blowing. He lays out the scriptures concerning himself across the entire Old Testament. Now, this is one of those amazing, once you see this in Luke 24:27, you will never unsee it. This will stick with you the rest of your life because it is just so profound. It's right in your face, but it's so easy to miss because we don't really understand our Hebrew Bibles, the Old Testament, often as well as we should. In the Hebrew Old Testament, there were three divisions. There was the Torah, the books of Moses, there were the prophets, and there were the writings. Now, when you go back and look at what Luke says, he says, beginning with Moses, that's Genesis to Deuteronomy, and then with all of the prophets, that's the second section of the Hebrew Bible. He said everything concerning himself in all of the writings, scripture. That word in Greek is graphe, which is the same word for scripture or for writings. If they're holy writings, they are scriptures. But because we don't always understand the breakdown of the Hebrew Old Testament and how people in Jesus' day understood it, divided it, and read it, we so easily miss what Luke is getting at, was that he covered the whole Old Testament in some way, shape, or form of all the prophecies about himself. So when Matthew talks about out of Egypt I will call my son, how does he make that connection from Hosea 11:1? Well, Jesus explained all of this to them, and certainly they passed these things on. There's some masterful teachings in the Bible that Jesus himself very specifically connects with the Old Testament, that the gospel writers connect with the Old Testament. And then there are the third category of things that neither does Jesus specifically connect himself with the Old Testament and his teachings, the red letters, nor do in the black letters the gospel writers themselves parenthetically connect with the Old Testament. There's the third category where there are things that are connected with Jesus in the Old Testament that are never explicitly stated. So a category of things that Jesus explicitly states, Psalm 22:1, which, read the whole psalm. It's a very Jesus crucifixion psalm. That's something Jesus very specifically connects. So this one just blows my mind. I would love to have heard it. I would love to hear the things that we've never made connection with that Jesus made connection with. And my point here is that I want to show how a deeper understanding of the Old Testament gives us such a more enriched and enlivened reading and living out of the New Testament, a greater appreciation for what's going on in these Gospels in the life of Jesus, so that we know better what's going on in our lives. And if that's helpful, if that's whoa, that's really cool. How can I can't ever unsee that. When I read Luke, I cannot unsee this anymore. It's such a cool, different envisioning of this walk and what is being discussed along this road. I just love it. I love it. And so if that's helpful to you, please hit that thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, we're right at 5,000. So cool. Appreciate you getting us there. And we'll talk again soon. Take care.